Hey everyone, welcome back to Elfbait. I'm Eli, and welcome back to the garage. If you pay attention when you're watching the videos, you'll notice that the garage behind me is changing. It's one of the reasons that the videos have been coming out a little slower. Is one of two main reasons. Garage is going through a bit of an overhaul to become more my space. It's still going to be a garage, but I'll have room out here to do some tabletop gaming, more on the miniatures bent. Not enough room out here for a table full of players for an RPG. But the other reason that it's been a bit since I've posted a video is I had videos recorded that I was in the process of getting rolled out. Something happened and they ended up getting deleted. I'm not sure exactly what, so I have to remake them. And I wanted to regroup a bit before having to go through that task. So the next few videos, you'll probably be seeing my nifty new shirt, the classic red box. But because I do these in a group. But today's video is just a kind of a quick DM tip video on things that I've noticed that DMs often feel that they shouldn't do, that I really feel there's either no harm in doing them or that they should continue to do. These are things that often are considered, or DMs are afraid of doing because they feel that there's some sort of they have some sort of negative impact on the game, or that they have been told to stop doing, or there's some sort of prevailing game theory that says that they are bad. There's a lot of advice that goes around, and you'll hear all sorts of different variations of what is good and is not. But these are just a few things in no particular order. It's not going to be a best of or top 5 or anything like that. Just some things that came up while I was while I perused the internet and read posts and talk to other gamers and the like. So to kick it off, really letting players fail or flounder. There's a lot of talk about the fun of the game, not doing anything to impact the fun, and I think that DMs often read that as they shouldn't make things too hard, or maybe they should make sure that the players can succeed, always fail forward, things like that. And that there is its place and time for that. But I also think that there's a good thing to be said about failure. Failure is good. We all learn. In real life, we learn by failing. We try, we fail, we learn from that failure, so the next time we try, our chances of success are better, or at least we feel more confident in facing that potential failure. Floundering, I like to think of as sort of not quite failing, but it is the an act being more difficult than ideal, and so you'll often see folks talk about don't make things too hard for your players, don't make things too hard for the characters, because then they may lose their momentum, and certainly you don't want to make everything a chore, but you certainly don't have to make it easy. And the main reasons why I think failing and floundering are good is, in addition to teaching, lessons and learning from those mistakes, is when you fail or when it's harder to succeed, those successes do feel better. If a party is getting their victories handed to them, or they never have to work to get out of situations, they're really going to start to feel very lackluster in their adventure, and it's going to become kind of ho-hum, and you may actually see their interest waning. The other thing, too, is that, especially with floundering, it turns those successes into something to be appreciated, and instead of to be, you're not going to have them take it for granted. So it's not going to be something they expect. So that's definitely going to go towards it as well. So next thing I would want to talk about would be too much role play or combat. And this really, for me, comes down to a play style issue. But if you were to go ahead and ask, a half a dozen folks what they preferred, role playing versus combat, you're likely going to get a number of different answers, probably as many as you ask folks. But I don't think that too much of either is a bad thing. First off, as a DM, let your players determine what is too much. If your players really hate combat, don't throw a lot of combat at them. If your players really hate role playing, make it less role playing in your games. But as far as the concept of too much, that is not for you, the DM, to really decide or worry about. Your players will tell you through their actions, through their show of interest, what it is that they want to do, and you can use that to gauge your play. Don't feel that you have to arbitrarily pull back from one or the other of those just based on some concept that there is a formula for too much or too little in either of those camps. Planning too much. I personally don't think there's such a thing. There's a efficient way to plan and there's an effective way to plan. But the more you can front load your game, the better. It just comes down to how you use that planning. Developing your campaign setting ahead of time can be very enriching and really can be very, I don't know, it can be a fun exercise if you're a DM. But you do want to be careful that you're not putting too much information into your campaign up front, because things are going to come up and they're going to change. But don't be afraid to, or if you overplan. If you like to plan, then do plan. Just do that with the caveat in your mind that your players are often going to bypass a good chunk of what you planned. But if that happens, it's not really a loss. Planning equals thought. Planning equals consideration for what goes on in your world. The more you plan, the more you think about your setting, the better prepared you will be for improvising and developing things on the fly. If you know in the back of your head what the general flavor of a particular culture is, then when your party asks you a member of your party asks you that question of, so, what are the beverages of this land like? You'll be able to say, well, in this kingdom, they prefer, berry wines as opposed to grape wines, and hard spirits are kind of frowned upon and considered very base. Or you might, whatever comes off the top of your head, but by thinking ahead of time, this will be there. Even if you're not going to use it on a regular basis, but it just flexes the muscles of creativity, and when you come down to improving your games, it'll just flow better. Also, your plans can be rerouted. If you make plan A and your party really just wipes that plan out, you can always steer them back to it. Or you can use it later on down the road. And that's a good point, because anything you use, or you come up with in your planning stages of your game can always be used elsewhere. Even if it's not used in the same campaign, it can be used in a future campaign. Let's say this really cool City of Thieves that you developed for your campaign setting, and your players never got there. The party just never went to this City of Thieves. And it's not a waste. It still exists. And if they never went to it in the last campaign, well, in the next campaign, it's still there. It's still fresh. It's unknown to them. Even if it is known to them. Sometimes things that are good in one campaign are good bringing back in another campaign, even in other campaign worlds. I do this in my games. I have certain favorite things that will pop up now and again. Some of them have become the butt of in-jokes amongst my group. But these things, anything you create, anything you plan for is not a loss, even if it doesn't get used as planned. Killing characters. I would frown. I like to delineate here. A lot of people talk about killing characters. I feel it is bad for a DM to set out to kill characters. I don't think that a DM should try to kill characters. If characters die based on their actions, if characters die because of the turn of the dice or just some element of play that is unavoidable, then so be it. It's part of the game. Character death will teach consequences to the players. Character death can create moments of drama. Character death is really one of those things that can actually enrich a campaign. I'm sure we've all seen movies or read books or comic books or seen TV shows, plays, whatever, where the death of a character, even a beloved character, is very important to the plot. And if you know, and in many cases in the books, these are supporting characters, and one might think that this is sort of the realm of NPCs in the game. But some of these characters might be PCs if you really think about their place in the game. I mean, certainly Ned Stark in Game of Thrones, I would hope that somebody wasn't playing that as a PC, because within the first few sessions he's dead. If that was a spoiler for you, I'm sorry. You really do need to get out from under that rock more often. But on the other hand, if you're Roy Fokker from Macross Robotech, you're there for a good half the show. You very well could be a PC, and you die, and that becomes an impetus for another PC to really step up his game. Let's say in a D&D campaign, Roy Fokker is a paladin, and Rick Hunter, and I'm using the American Robotech names because off the top of my head, I'll be damned if I can remember what the Macross names were. But let's say Roy Fokker's your paladin and Rick Hunter is your fighter. They're going through the campaign, and about maybe 9th, 10th level, Roy Fokker dies. Rick Hunter may choose to use that as the decision for his next level that he takes. He's going to go paladin, and he's going to go with the oath. He's going to work towards the oath of vengeance for this paladin because he's got to go out and get revenge for Roy. So that without that death, without that character death, it might not have been a big thing for Rick. I mean, if an NPC dies, usually doesn't really have that much of an impact on a player character. Now, I've seen campaigns where beloved NPCs have really swayed the game, and there's nothing wrong with that. And certainly a player character doesn't have to die for there to be drama, but it is a dramatic moment, and it can help your game. So certainly don't avoid character death if it's warranted, but don't kill characters. Using the same monsters over and over again. This is something that happens especially with low CR monsters. We go through them, we're like, okay, well, kobolds again, goblins again. So there are a couple of reasons why reusing these monsters is a good thing. First of all, having common monsters in your setting creates a sense of setting, or helps reinforce a sense of setting. If goblins are a frequent encounter for your players, in dungeons, traveling between locations as minions for bad guys, this says something about your world. It says that goblins are a thing, they're prevalent in the world, and they are multifaceted. They exist on their own, they exist as minions. If it's like the campaign I'm running right now, they are following a band of goblins who have been up to no good, but on that pursuit, they've run into goblins working in an inn. So what does this say about goblins in my setting? It says that there are wild goblins, and that sometimes goblins will wander in from the wilderness and kind of settle down. Orcs, kobolds, these things, all of these critters can be, by their use and how they're used can help establish the setting. And the frequency of their use also helps establish the setting. In addition, reuse of existing monsters can allow a DM a chance to play around a bit. Your players are going to learn to expect certain things from your monsters, and if you keep using the same monsters over and over again, they're likely going to become complacent and expect that a goblin's a goblin, a kobold's a kobold. This gives you, as a DM, an opportunity to throw in the occasional monkey wrench, or to allow for variance on these. So the goblins of the south are perhaps a little wild and are the ones that occasionally come into the settlements. But what about those goblins of the north? They're horrible. They're just absolutely just vicious, bestial monsters. I mean, they're barely cultured. Maybe the goblins of the east, maybe those guys are highly cultured. maybe it's not even so distinct. Maybe your red eye goblins versus your black scar goblins are just tribally different. One worships the goblin god. Maybe this other group decides to try and elevate themselves, and they actually worship they worship Grumsh, or maybe they worship some sort of old ancient cult that they found. They stumbled on some sort of megalith or some sort of altar or ancient temple, and they've taken up the worship of this ancient deity. So those monsters that you use over and over again, and goblins is a good example because they're pretty redundant and pretty ubiquitous for many campaigns. They're a good option for playing around with them, and these monsters that you're going to use frequently are going to provide you with that. The last thing, and this sort of is a blanket statement that kind of goes into many of the things I've already said, but using tropes and cliches. Don't feel you have to avoid using tropes and cliches. Tropes and cliches exist in the game because the things that made the game happen in the first place were based on people sitting around and going, wouldn't it be cool if we could be the people taking the ring to to Mount Doom to destroy it? Wouldn't it be awesome if we could be Robin Hood? Wouldn't it be amazing if we could be the Knights of the Round Table? Slaying dragons, finding treasure, exploring dark and spooky caverns, uncovering ancient secrets, battling wizards, grumpy, stoic barbarians, and valiant paladins, duplicitous, sneaky thieves, and good-natured small folk. These are all things that drew people into this genre in the first place. So to deny those tropes and those cliches is to really deny the bait that drew people to the game and its constituent source material, that the books, the novels, the plays, the traditions, the folklore, the myths that came together to form fantasy RPGs. So don't avoid them. You don't want to overuse them because those that can get tiresome. But understand that they exist within your world, they exist within the game, they exist within the hobby. You can modify them, you can tweak them, you can trade them out. Sometimes, if you're very crafty, you can disguise the story of a book or a play that you know of and work it in as an adventure, and nobody will be any the wiser. There's plenty of people out there who still don't want to believe me that the Japanese samurai film Ron is King Lear. It is. It's King Lear. Now, because of Japanese feudal tradition, it's not daughters, it's sons. But, Forbidden Planet is The Tempest. It's Shakespeare's The Tempest. People don't believe it when they watch it until you break it down and tell them. But that's because those were done very well. And not to mention, those stories are very elemental. You could easily throw Hamlet in a dwarf hold, and nobody would think Hamlet necessarily. Dwarves and clans and families and cultures and grudges and outcasts, that's all very tied in with the kind of the collective mythology and understanding of dwarves, classic fantasy dwarves. So don't avoid tropes and cliches. So that's kind of the last of my list. I'm sure there's a lot of other stuff that's out there that people could think of that I'm sure I'll think of 5 minutes from now. But when it comes down to it, as a DM, allow yourself the freedom and the comfort to just do. So many people think that DMing is very difficult, that it's hard work. There is work involved, but I'd hardly say that it is difficult. DMing is something you have to do. You certainly have to do it, and you certainly have to practice it to get better at it. But it's all very basic, elementary things. It's things we've all been doing since we were kids. Hopefully we've been doing it since we were kids. Not everybody has a childhood environment where they were encouraged to play or imagine Some people were not allowed the option to read. If you're like me, I have not read as many books as I wish I would have because I have a reading disability. It's not a strong one, but it certainly makes reading difficult, more difficult than it is. I have a minor version. I have a minor form of dyslexia, and so for me, reading is a chore. I may enjoy what I'm reading, and there's there's that one I'll lose myself in a book, and I'll find that a lot of the frustration goes away, but I don't want to spend too much time on that. My point being is that you got me rambling. But anyways, the point being, we all have these things, these places that we come from. But as far as DMing goes, just relax. You're there to create a setting for people to play in. Good lion's share of the work is going to be done by your players. All you have to do is set the scene. You have to place the pieces, let your players play. Give them a dark hallway to explore, give them doors to check out, give them treasures to tantalize and trick them and bait them into danger. It doesn't have to be a master stroke of plot. Sometimes it can be just saving the prince. Sometimes it can be just stopping the great evil. There's nothing wrong with that. Allow yourself to have fun. Enjoy being a DM. And stop second guessing yourself. You're going to have a lot of people telling you the right way, the wrong way, the correct way, the best way. All of these are just opinion. Figure out your style, figure out what works for you, and stick to that. Watch for when it doesn't go right, correct when it goes wrong. Make sure you talk to your players, make sure you talk to other DMs. But ultimately, it's all on you. So I hope that these few things that I've listed, these points I've made here are going to be helpful to DMs. They may even be helpful to players. If you want to share some things that you feel that DMs think that they should stop doing but really shouldn't, go ahead and share them. Talk about it in the comments below. Ask me questions. Always happy to communicate with the folks out there in the internets. Really enjoy making the videos. Hopefully going to get back into a rhythm on these, especially as the garage comes back together. Like, share, and subscribe. You can email me now. I've got the baittheelf@gmail.com. There's the Elfbait Facebook group, and I am Elfbait on Twitter, so you can find me there. Hopefully this has been a helpful video, and get out and game.